والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh once again. All of you guys. I saw you all of you this morning, but alhamdulillah, now I'm greeting again. The companions would actually, at times, if they would just, they were walking on a road and something would come between them, like a tree or something, they would greet each other on the other side again. So there's no harm.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
We were busy with the book, Fleeing from Faith to Faith, compilation of 40 hadith on pandemic, contagion, medication, etc. We didn't do all of the ahadith, but I selected some of the ahadith from the first section of the book. Today I wanted to look at hadith number 6, which is actually the first hadith in the second section of the book, the section on preventative measures. Now, I don't specifically want to look at it from the perspective of preventative measures. I did speak about that a little bit last week, but I just want to look at some lessons that this hadith teaches us, worldview shaping lessons that this hadith teaches us. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us, as narrated to us by Ubadah ibn Samit, an Ubadah ibn Samit. His name is Ubadah because it's غير منصرف, right? عن عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا ضرر ولا ضرار. لا ضرر ولا ضرار. This hadith you must actually memorize. This is the hadith. It's really that short. The hadith is narrated by Ibn Majah. And in addition to this hadith being a hadith, it's also like one of the seminal maxims of Islamic law. One of the universals in Islamic law. It applies throughout the Sharia. What does it mean? لا ضرر ولا ضرار. So firstly, I mean, maybe you can help me translate it. This la, what kind of la is this?
Is it La Nafitul Jins?
La nafiya lil jins. That's good, yes. What does that do? Well, firstly, how do you identify it and what does it do? Just think
the
of
impact on the next word.
Say again?
So the impact of the law on the next word.
Right. So the impact of the la on the next word. You must just keep an example in your mind. And the first one that comes in the Quran, La rayba fi. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Very first verse. La rayba. The next word will be mansoob. Right? It will be nasb. And generally, as there is no al and no tanween. The la nafiya lil jins, it is an emphatic way of negating something. To say almost la darara, there is no harm whatsoever. There is no harm whatsoever. ولا ضرار. ولا ضرار. Guys in the second year, tell me quickly today. You identify this word dirara. Even from the third year, you can tell me. نوع الكلمة من أي باب. Which bab does it come from? And what type of word is it?
The third bab, Maulana?
It comes from the third bab, yes. And what else? What kind of word is it? فعال. Isn't the masdar over the فعالا? So isn't this word a masculine? ضرارا.
Just taking my notes, Maulana.
And what's the quality of the third bab? We did it right at the end of our class today.
Mutuality.
Mutuality.
And
That's it,
mutuality.
right. Okay. So darar means harm. La darara. So Rasul said, there is no harm. And we understand that as there is no harm to yourself, and dirar means mutual harm. There is no harming one another. There is no harming yourself, and there is no harming one another. That's what the hadith says. La darara wa la dirar. There is no harming yourself whatsoever, and there is no harming one another whatsoever. It's a principle in the Sharia. It's one of the seminal principles of the qawaid fiqhiyya, the maxims that underlie Islamic law, Sharia. It's also one of the principles that form the maqasid of the Sharia, the higher objectives of the Sharia, and all of that is. So it's basically telling you this hadith is embedded in the Islamic worldview. This hadith is embedded in the Islamic worldview. Whenever I come across something, as a believer, I always want to ensure that I'm neither harming myself in any way, nor am I harming anything else. Right? Because only after not harming can I ensure benefit. Like the first part of ensuring benefit is not removing the benefit that is already there, not removing the good that is already there. And so this hadith is similar in that regard. It tells me that as a believer, I must always ensure that I'm neither harming myself nor am I harming anyone else. And you can apply this in almost any context. We can apply it in the big discussions that this book is relating the hadith in relation to about medication and pandemics and all of that stuff, taking precaution. Right? But you can apply it also in the situation of dealing with a beggar. Right? If you're not going to give him something, if you're not in a good mood, you don't have anything to give him, you're not going to give him anything, at least don't take his dignity away from him. At least don't say something bad to him. Why? This is who we are. This is who we are as believers. La darara wa la dirar. We don't harm. And even when we do harm, right, then we harm only because it's supposed to bring about a greater good. Oh, and only because that's the only necessary way to prevent even greater harm. Like, I give you an example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wal fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl. Allah says in the Quran, fitna is worse than qatl, than killing. What's it speaking about? It's speaking about when there's a perpetuation of shirk and anti-Islam, right? Then it is better to fight. The only reason that we can fight over there is because that fighting prevents greater harm to society. Then it's that greater harm to society is having an Allah-less society, a society that is completely oblivious to Allah. So even when the Sharia encourages us to get into situations of superficial harm, then it is to prevent greater harm and to bring about benefit. Firstly, to prevent greater harm, and then to bring about benefit. That's extremely important. That's extremely important because, sometimes, from a nafsi perspective, sometimes we as believers, there's situations in which Islam perhaps allows some degree of assertiveness or even harshness. But we lose the spirit of Islam in that regard. You're allowed to be assertive. You're not allowed to desire harm. You're allowed to maybe be severe. You're not allowed to desire, to detest. What I mean by that is, it may be that there is a situation, somebody comes to you. I give you another example. Person A comes to you. They're asking you about person B. Now, person B is someone that you know a lot of. You have all the dirt on person B. Right? But person A is asking you for a valid reason. He's asking you because, person B is approaching them for marriage or for business. They are going to get into a relationship with a person. And so it's your Muslim responsibility to be truthful to them when they ask you about person B. But now what happens? You think to yourself, okay, according to Sharia, I can now tell this person bad things about person B. But in your heart, you're not looking at keeping A away from harm. In your heart, you're looking at harming B. And so it may have been sufficient for you to tell person A, look, I had an encounter with person B in which they didn't hold up their word in business. And the same occurred with a number of other people. And therefore, I can't recommend the person to you as a business partner, for example. And stopping over there, you go tell the guy about, person B, he ripped me off like this, he ripped that person off like that. And how he treats his mother and his dog, and he's just like he swears and he has this problem, he eats too much. And your objective over there is not to protect A, but it's to harm B. But that is contrary to what the worldview and the mindset of a believer is supposed to be. La darara wa la dirar. I have to say something about B now that is going to be somewhat incriminating. But I'm only doing it to prevent harm from A. I'm not doing it to harm B. I actually want good for B. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us that in another hadith where he says, Unsur akhaka. Unsur akhaka. Help your brother. ظالما أو مظلوما. Help your brother whether he is the oppressor or he's being oppressed. Help your brother whether he is oppressing or he's being oppressed. The companions asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know how to help our brother when he's being oppressed, but how do we help him when he's the oppressor? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, prevent him from doing that thing, prevent him from doing that oppression. Or kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam. Prevent him from doing that oppression. Why? Though he's doing something wrong, he may even be harming somebody that you love. What do you want? You don't want him to be damned to the hellfire forever. No. You want him to stop harming. You want him to make amends. But you also want good for him. It's not within the nature of the believer to desire harm. La darara wa la dirar. Right? And so with that worldview in mind, on the level of our physical action, on the level of our internal state as well, and on the level of our internal desire, that is something that we must strive for. That is something that we must strive for and allow to shape our worldview. But it's in light of that principle, that universal principle that permeates throughout the Sharia, that the Maulana starts this discussion on preventative measures here. And he speaks a little bit about the purposes of Islamic law. Now, this is actually quite a deep discussion, so I don't know if I must get into it right now, but what do you think the purpose of Sharia is? We would have touched on it or mentioned it before many times. Anybody? Why is Sharia there?
Hukukul and hukukul ibad.
Okay, as you says, for hukukullah and hukukul ibad. We have another person, Nazwa.
Chef, isn't it to have a guide, certain guidelines of how we go about and live our life?
Okay, yes, that's good as well. And then there was Riyaz says to live in accordance with Allah's laws. Amira said to regulate. And we had as well, I think Sister Ruqayya was going to say something.
Maulana, I feel it is a means of those who is following the right path and those who have gone astray off the right path from Allah Ta'ala, and that we, like Allah Ta'ala, show that compassion and mercy, that we are not our own self gonna rectify and do the inner muhasabah and that inner journey, but that we also have that love and compassion for others, even the transgressors or the wrongdoers, and that we find a way with wisdom, obviously, to also get them to see the right path and to understand it, because their influence that they radiate is all negativity. And if they also come onto the right path, surely they will also influence so many people. So if we look, for example, at the politicians of today and all that, and we think like Mandela and the grandson, Mandla Mandela, becoming Muslim, then we see how it influenced people to see the Islam now in such a beautiful way as well.
Okay. So, yes. So all of the answers that we got are, are valid answers. But Munir says laws to enable us to succeed in this world and the year after. Mindwise Clinic says to protect deen, life, property, lineage, and intellect. All correct. So all of those are correct. But if we look at Sharia, Sharia is Islamic law. It's Islamic law. It is there to regulate. It is there to create rules. It is there to, to do all of those things. But that would simply beg the question: why the need for those rules? Why the need for those laws? Why the need for regulation? And I think that's the deeper question that I'm asking. And the way that the scholars of the Sharia have answered that is that the Sharia is there to ensure a wholesome life in this world and in the next. To ensure the greatest degree of benefit to everyone in this life and in the next. Right? This is not speaking about the purpose for why you live. This is speaking about what's the purpose, what's the function of Islamic law. And so they say, many, and again, I bring up this point, oftentimes in our mind, Sharia was that thing that just restricts and, you just think this is the shackles that keep me from having fun. No, we should actually change that. The Sharia is there to ensure the ultimate or the greatest degree of benefit and pleasure for everyone in society in this life and in the next. And that is achieved by preserving a variety of things, preserving faith and religion, preserving life, preserving intellect, preserving progeny and preserving progeny and preserving wealth. And we restrict the maqasid to those 5 headings, but under those headings, like everything is included: preservation of our environment, preservation of people's honor, preservation of or did I say the world we live in, environment, preservation, everything that is required for us to have wholesome lives in this life and in the next is included in that. And that's what the Sharia is there for. Right? To prevent harm and to bring benefit.
Alana, can I ask a question?
Sure, Bismillah.
On Sharia, we have governments. Okay, each government has their Muslim, talking about Muslim countries, they have their own interpretations of Sharia sometimes. It is good, yeah. They enforce it. But what do you have to say about that enforcement, for example, in Muslim countries where women are forced to wear a scarf and some women prefer not actually to wear a scarf. Can you force women in a country, or is it the right that you should actually force them, or can they not use their own prerogative whether they want to wear a scarf or not?
That's a decision of politics. Firstly, on a philosophical level, right? All governments, even the most liberal of them, they curtail freedoms. They definitely do. So even the most liberal of governments, they do curtail freedoms. The question is, what gets curtailed? What freedoms get curtailed? Generally in Sharia, there's la ikrah. We don't compel people to do things. If it is such that people expressing their freedoms bring about greater harms to society, then that may be a situation wherein curtailing freedoms become justified. So to us, living in a South African society, forcing a female to wear a scarf seems absurd. And even in many Muslim societies, they would never force that. But if we come to the question of, will we allow people to walk around in bikinis? Shara'an, no. It's the responsibility of the leader there to not do that, because it contributes to the over-sexualization of a society. So it's a deep question. Sharia is deeply bought into the idea of maintaining personal freedoms, but when it negatively affects the broader society, then those freedoms can be curtailed. We'll tell the listener, here's a space for ladies, whatever, and you see, what we have by way of Sharia governments in the world today are not really representative of what the Sharia should be like. Like, for example, barring women from driving, like, Allahu A'lam, how you even get to that from a Sharia perspective. Like, what an Islamic government is supposed to be doing, what a Khalifa is supposed to be doing, he's supposed to be creating safe spaces. Like, like in an Islamic state and in Sharia law as well, if a female in a marriage even has the slightest degree of fear that she's going to be harmed by her husband, she has the right to leave. And there's supposed to be safe spaces in the society where she can go to and just leave. So, I mean, it's not directly related to your question, but what I was saying is that there's supposed to be safe spaces. If a female wants to be outside without a scarf on, then there should be safe spaces in the society where she can do that without causing harm to society. But obviously that begs a whole lot of broader questions.
Shukran, Malana. So I get the point. It's there. Each country has their own interpretation of what is enforceable and what is not enforceable.
Yeah, but
let's say,
again, so they will have degrees of interpretation, but obviously that interpretation has to get its scope from the actual that exists in the Torah, and it comes from the Quran and the Hadith. You can't just make up your own stuff.
So they actually introduce politics into it then. Put it that way.
Yeah, that definitely does. The Sharia then assert the holistic benefit of society. Certainly it does. Individual benefit and also societal benefit.
Shukran.
Okay, so I think we're going to end there for now, inshallah. We'll pick up on another hadith next week, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We'll end there for now. جزاكم الله خيرا وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
شكرا مولانا. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.